On January 1st, 2016, the 17th Sustainable Development Goals, also known as SDGs, of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development were adopted by world leaders. In September 2015, at a historic UN climate officially coming into force. In an exclusive interview with Kim Astene, Administrator of the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, I started by asking the pace and progress of the SDGs implementation, extending it to matters including climate change, youth entrepreneurship, and more.
We have had many setbacks, and we mustn't forget that when we planned and committed in 2015, as you say, in the UN General Assembly to the SDGs, we did not plan on having a pandemic that disrupted everything. We did not envisage living in a world where wars and conflicts now are at the highest level since 1945, where our economy is disrupted, where many developing countries are fiscally, in terms of their budgets and ability to invest in recovery, severely constrained. There is a debt crisis playing out for many developing countries right now. All that to say, there are headwinds that are very tough at the moment, particularly for developing countries. And so there have been setbacks, and we have not advanced as fast and as far as we would like to. But within every goal, what we also find is that countries made different choices. They made different priorities to what they would focus on. And so there are, for virtually every goal, also examples of breakthroughs. In some countries, poverty rates did not go up during COVID. They continue to go down. In some countries, life expectancy did not go down, while in others it actually really deteriorated. And this is also something that we as a development organization, UNDP, are studying very carefully. The insights we can gain from how countries are trying to implement the goals, but also deal with disruptions and setbacks, tells us a lot about where there is hope for the future. And in that sense, we are still hopeful that 2030 is not just a hypothetical deadline, it's a way in which we still can focus a lot of efforts to deal with poverty, energy transitions, vulnerability, gender equality, basically the 17 goals.
All right. Talking about climate change, the biggest thing going on right now in the world is the COP28, and we are at a crucial and very delicate stage when climate effects are at their climax. And I usually tell people that climate action cannot wait, because the longer we wait, the worse things get. And in your own perspective, what should be done to accurately address these particular problems beyond just good policies, beyond just good texts that are put in papers, but when you get to the ground, the implementation is even very minimal? What is so tangible that could be done by the countries collectively, because it's our own issue as the whole world? What could be tangibly done to address these matters when we still can?
Let me start from a global perspective, because climate change in part doesn't really care where emissions come from. They end up in the atmosphere. And this is perhaps the most transformative side of climate change, that really for the first time we are bound together as nations across the world to succeed or fail depending on whether we work together or not. Emissions that are put out by the United States or by China, Australia, Japan, they will affect Rwanda. It doesn't matter that they occurred there. Equally, how Africa develops in the next 10, 20, 30 years in terms of its energy infrastructure, its mobility infrastructure, will also matter to what happens maybe to a small island nation in the Pacific or to a Danish economy in Europe. So this is a moment where truly the idea of multilateralism becomes fundamental to be able to act. That's why the Climate Change Convention is so critical.
Yeah, you said it perfectly, and I guess all you meant is that blame game cannot help, and people ought to get into action. But where do we start today? Where do we start? What is so urgent that we should step in fast, and then maybe even if we have to blame each other, it will come later. But today, I do not believe it's time for blaming each other.
You put it in a very succinct way, Sam, and I think my conviction as somebody who has now worked in development and with developing countries and the international community for many years, don't surrender your sovereignty to others on whom you, in a sense, bank for enabling you to do something. Simply put, every country should take these national climate strategies as their own expression of a national set of priorities, formulate what is feasible, the transition in the energy sector, in agriculture, in transport, look at opportunities for leveraging digital technology to allow greater energy efficiency, renewable energy systems to function, and begin to invest in that transition.
And maybe narrowing it to a local context, what's your take on the Loss and Damage Fund, and how can Rwanda tap into this fund as well, and the carbon market framework that was recently launched by Rwanda during this COP28? What's your take on this?
Well, the first thing I want to say is, here is the Climate Convention, and people often criticize it can be very slow. Actually, what we have just seen is when member states can actually agree with each other, the Climate Convention is the perfect platform. In less than 10 months, from Egypt to Dubai, an adoption of the Loss and Damage Fund in principle, a decision in Dubai to establish it, within 48 hours, $700 million pledged. So this is multilateralism at work. It's a great opportunity. And for Rwanda, as you ask, it is immediately an opportunity to actually obtain financing that is related to the damage that it is already suffering. Rwanda has had very serious impacts already in terms of extreme weather events. The Loss and Damage Fund is meant to help countries to access financing to recover. But let's also be clear, as we move forward, the need for financing is much, much greater than this Loss and Damage Fund at the moment can cater to. And here, the carbon markets facility becomes a very important part of Rwanda being able to access financing in order to invest in its economy today. The registry and UNDP has been a very proud partner also to Rwanda in trying to work towards Rwanda being an example of what a high-integrity carbon market can look like. Because if you want to make this sort of market work, then you need to have transparency, accountability, and above all, integrity in order for this to function. We look forward to working with Rwanda, and we already saw in Dubai the agreements that Rwanda signed with other countries, carbon credits being traded. Yeah. This could become a major boost to Rwanda's economy in terms of having financing to these investments.
Yeah. About hunger pit faced and entrepreneurship and startups development and financing these projects, I'm curious, what pushes UNDP to put its money in financing startups, projects like the ones that are being pitched today at Hunger Pitch Fest?
I'll give you a more technical response second, but let me start, Sam, with a very simple observation. For me, for many of us who work in the UNDP, development is about the future and development is about hope. If we only ever use our development skills to record, measure and, in a sense, document shortcomings and failures, we're not exactly making people feel confident and also courageous about investing in new areas. So something like the Hunger Pitch Festival is about celebrating courage, success, potential, possibility. And, you have a generation of young people on the African continent and also here in Rwanda who want to contribute to national development, who want to survive, who want to earn a living, who want to experiment. And if we don't encourage that generation and give them some support, if you're a young person, you are struggling. You are not going to walk into a bank and find the doors wide open to say, oh, you're a young entrepreneur, let me give you a loan. You're not going to find people who are going to say, oh, you can't even get some of the basic lab equipment you may need in order to experiment.
With these innovative startups and their projects, what signal does it give for the future in terms of contributing to the economies, mostly of the African countries and Rwanda in particular?
I think two things. One, we underestimate the significance of young people in actually driving economic progress. Very often societies look at young people as being, in a sense, learners rather than doers. I think we have to recalibrate our appreciation of how different a young person who has gone through a good education and at 18, 19 years or maybe 20 years is actually already an enormous asset to his or her society, because they have learned skills that were not available to us. They can become productive drivers of innovation and of new markets and new possibilities. Secondly, I think we also need to appreciate that in the way government enables these kinds of success stories to emerge is central. There are moments in time when you need government to lead on development. For instance, in UNDP, we strongly advocate for government's role in looking at digital public infrastructure. You don't put that infrastructure in place, people cannot operate on it. Yeah. That's why the role of government is central, but almost simultaneously, it's looking at the education sector, so school leavers are actually digitally literate when they leave. Looking at the financial sector, giving them incentives so the startup doesn't basically run into closed doors when they're looking for their first loan. Yeah. That's how you build a digital ecosystem, which very quickly realizes that government has a role to play, but enterprise, the market, whether in finance and technology, is actually going to be the real driver of acceleration, and that's when you come to scale. We need to achieve scalable outputs. There is no point in having a lot of startups that essentially service a fraction of society. Yeah. We need to address the transitional aspirations of economies across the African continent. That means thinking big and ultimately going big also.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.